Okay, so that's just kind of the nuts and bolts of how the course is going to be structured, a quick introduction. So I'm going to now give you a quick overview of the main personality theories that we'll be covering in the course. First of all, the definition of personality. As we'll see, every theorist conceptualizes personality slightly differently, so there isn't necessarily a universal definition, but I think this is one that at least most of the theorists would largely agree upon, and by Gordon Alpert. It's a dynamic organization inside the person of psychophysical systems, meaning it's something real and something that's interlinked, and it creates patterns of behavior, thoughts, and feelings. So I really want you to focus on this triad, okay? Because all of the personality theories are explaining this triad. Not all of the theories necessarily use the word personality. For example, Skinner didn't. Skinner thought the term personality was too abstract. But his theory is explaining why people differ in terms of their behavior, thoughts, and feelings. And so it still comes under a personality theory, because that's what they're all trying to do, and explaining why there's differences in these three things here. Now, when you think about what personality is, you probably initially think of some labels, some descriptive words that you can apply to a person to describe at least somewhat stable patterns of behavior, right? If someone is typically tidy, then you might describe that person as being tidy and that being part of their personality. Or if they're being, across situations, very sociable, then you might class that person as being social in terms of their personality. But as we'll go on to see, personality is a lot more complicated than that. It's very much at the why of why people think, feel, and behave the way they do. It's very much part of people's motivation. Okay, people typically try to create an environment that's in harmony with their personality. If you're a very extroverted person, then you typically look for social opportunities to socialize and to energize. And if you're not so extroverted, then that's not how you view the world. And you won't value so much a job in sales, for example, when there's constant social demands on you in comparison to someone who's highly extroverted. And as we'll look at later in the course, we can even somewhat predict people's political orientations or political views based upon certain personality characteristics. If it's a large part of who they are, for example, people who are very orderly and want not only their own environment to be very orderly, but society to be very orderly, typically tilt towards political conservatism. And there's other personality traits that are relevant as well. So it's very much at the core of what people value and what motivates people to seek out what they seek out. As we talk about the personality theories and research, I want you to also consider some big questions. Is personality more due to nature or nurture? Is it determined, or do we have free will over our personality? And is it stable, or is it something that changes over the course of our lives? All of the theorists that we'll cover somewhat differ in terms of these big philosophical questions, and we'll look at that as well as we go through the theories. Now, I also want to quickly give a definition of psychotherapy, because most of the personality theorists that we'll cover were also psychotherapists. Not all of them. Some of them were researchers and academics who wanted to understand personality more generally, but the majority of the major early personality theorists were psychotherapists who were mainly coming up with personality theories to help inform their own psychotherapy practices, to help make sense of their patients and to perhaps change certain aspects of the patients throughout the psychotherapeutic process. So psychotherapy, a primary interpersonal treatment based on psychological principles involving a trained therapist and client who has a mental disorder, problem, or complaint, and is intended by the therapist to be remedial for the client's disorder, problem, complaint. Of course, what these psychological principles are will differ based upon whether it's a learning approach, a behavioral approach, a psychodynamic approach, and so on. So I'm going to very quickly give you a gist of the main theories. Like I say, we're going to go more in depth on them, obviously, just so long as you have a basic idea. You maybe already have a basic idea from Intro to Psych and from other courses you've done. But these psychodynamic theories We're very much focused on unconscious influences, the idea that you're not entirely aware over everything that's contributing to your behavior, that sometimes either repressed sexual desires or unresolved complexes or repressed childhood traumas has been pushed down into your unconscious and somehow is having an influence on who you are today. Again, which aspect of the unconscious the theories focus on differs from, for example, Adler to Jung to Freud and so on, but typically the psychodynamic theorists are focusing on unconscious influences and early life experiences. Dispositional theories are arguing that people either can be split into types or that they have stable traits that predispose them to act in a certain way, okay, that they have a certain disposition, that you're predisposed to be more sociable in a situation or not. So, what the trait theories and type theories have in common is that they both argue people behave consistently over time and consistently over situations. But obviously they somewhat differ in that trait theories will look at what personality traits can be applied to a person. Is this person extroverted and conscientious and agreeable and so on? Whereas the types will split people into being either introverts or extroverts, rather than looking at where they fall on a particular dimension. Usually intertwined with dispositional theories are biological theories, that there's some biological reason as to why people are predisposed to act in a certain way, either differences in brain structure or differences in hormone baselines or differences in neurotransmitters, or perhaps the idea that dysfunction to certain brain parts can predispose someone to be more impulsive or more aggressive, whatever it is we're looking at. But the idea that some biological factors contribute to people's behavior. Behavioral and social learning theories look at environmental reinforcements. So the idea that some behaviors are more likely in a person because they've been encouraged in the past, that they've been met with rewards, and some behaviors are less likely in a person because they've been discouraged in the past, been met with punishments, or that they haven't been suitably rewarded. And another additional part of that is also modeling, that sometimes people will model their behavior off role models in their lives. And then cognitive theories are very much about the idea that our conscious awareness has a big influence on our feelings and our behavior. Okay, that we somewhat choose what to focus on mentally, that we can maybe ruminate over this thing that's making us sad, that will then have a more negative impact on us, or we can choose to kind of change what we're thinking about, that our mindset has a large impact on our behavior. Let me clear up a misconception that maybe some of you have. One of the biggest mistakes I find by psychology students is that cognition means the brain. Okay, it does not. If we're talking about certain regions of the brain corresponding to behavior, that's a biological approach. If we're talking about brain dysfunction causing changes in behavior, that's a biological approach. Cognition or cognitive theories are focusing on the mind, okay, your conscious awareness. So there's a difference here between the biological matter of the brain, the physical matter, and then your mind, what you're thinking about, what your conscious awareness is, okay? So the biological material falls under biological theories. Your conscious awareness, your mind, what you're thinking about, falls under cognitive theories. And then humanistic theories very much took a more optimistic view of human nature than the other theories up to that point, arguing that people are typically driven to self-actualize or to better themselves, to reach personal growth, to achieve all that they want to achieve, and to be better people and to contribute positively to society. A very optimistic view on human behavior. Okay, so how might these theories differ in terms of understanding a particular concept? So let's take aggression, for example. How might a psychodynamic theorists make sense of aggression. They might argue that there's unconscious reasons as to why someone is behaving aggressively, that there's some unconscious desire to be destructive or to cause aggression in this situation. Dispositional theories would argue that this person has a stable aggressive trait that is stable across time and across situations, that's pushing them to act more aggressively in certain situations. Probably intertwined with this would be a biological theory that one might have a genetic predisposition to being more aggressive than the average person. Behavioral and social learning would argue that the aggression has been learned. Either they've modeled this of aggressive role models early in their life, or they were rewarded previously. They maybe got what they wanted by acting aggressively in situations, and so it was encouraged. Cognitive theories would argue that the person has a network of aggressive thoughts, that are influencing their emotions, that they're ruminating on this particular thing and getting more angry and angry about it until it's then having a large impact on their behavior. And then, since humanistic theories argue that people are naturally drawn to bettering themselves and to personal growth, they would argue that there must have been some interference with this natural progression that's then disrupted their self-actualization, their progress towards bettering themselves. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is apply the same idea, but to understanding depression. So you can work with the people around you, and maybe small groups of 3 or 4, just to work it out. But how might each of these theories explain why people might differ in depression? I'll give you a few minutes, and then I'll see what you come up with. Sure. So pretty much what you said. Another maybe way of looking at the behavioral social learning would be maybe a lack of positive reinforcements in your life, which is causing you not to be positive in how you behave. Humanistic theories maybe also a certain need not being met, so you're not having a good self-image of yourself, not having high self-esteem. So then you're not feeling motivated to really grow as a person and reach what you want to fulfill. Good, thanks. So why do we have this number of theories? Why are they all different from each other? Well, first of all, the theorists themselves have different backgrounds, right? They're trying to explain human behavior. That's obviously going to be influenced by their own interactions with people. They might also be trying to explain particular people in their lives, so why they're different from others, or why this particular family member is the way that they are. So they might have personal motivations such as that. They'll differ on the big questions we looked at, the philosophical questions on nature or nurture having a role to play. Different reasons for studying personality. Some, like I say, were academics, researchers wanting to understand how personality can be generally studied. Some were psychotherapists wanting to study personality in particular contexts. And then different approaches. Some used case study approaches, as we'll go on to see, some surveys, some experiments. Some had a clinical background, some a more research background, and so again, that's going to have an influence on how they approach studying personality. But as we'll go on to see, all of these different theories offer something. And so quite often, typically nowadays, a psychotherapist or a psychologist will use a combination of theories when trying to make sense of a person's behavior. A lot of these could go hand in hand, right? Maybe someone does have a biological predisposition that tilts them to being more depressive and more withdrawn, but then they might also likely have a network of negative thoughts and negative filtering styles. And so you could kind of alter in which you choose to address depending on what kind of school of thought you're in. You could address maybe differences in neurotransmitters with medication, or you could address the thoughts directly through perhaps cognitive behavioral therapy. And so there's different approaches, and quite often we'll look at a combination of theories because they all come with their own strengths and weaknesses, as we'll go on to see.